All right. So, part 6 of the 6-part course, although I think we're going to have a part 7. Well, let's see what happens tonight. Just one other thing. But we're very excited to be learning about the laws of kosher in mind and body based on what we eat. But maintaining a kosher home in our homes and in our maintaining a kosher kitchen, which is so important. And okay, tonight we're going to be learning mainly about alcohol, wine and spirits. And there's actually a lot to say about it. Time to life, and to kosher. The more we learn, the more we can do. The purpose of learning is to change us. One of the ways to change us is knowing what to do. Well, the ma'aser sheyas and the actions that we need to take. All right. So tonight we are going to learn about alcoholic beverages. Now, let's start. We're going to start tonight with wine. And kosher wine is critical. Critical. Story is told with the Rebbe Maharash, fourth Chabad Rebbe. The Rebbe said this in his opening mimer, his opening discourse in Yud Shvat. The Rebbe took leadership in 1951. The Maharash traveled to France and he came into a bar and he went to a man over there and said, "Younger man, young man. Yayin Nesach is metamtem halev hamoyach." Drinking Yayin Nesach, it stuffs up your heart and your mind. We can't think clearly and we can't feel. Our emotions and our mind don't work well. Definitely not spiritually. It doesn't let us think correctly spiritually. That's what Yayin Nesach does. And like everybody says, non-kosher wine is worse than non-kosher food in some ways. It's hard to say what's worse, but yes. So Younger man, Yayin Nesach. So what is Yayin Nesach? And that's what we're going to start with tonight. Yayin Nesach. Yayin Nesach means wine that was used and poured. Nesach means poured. Yayin Nesach, wine that was poured for idol worship. Okay? So they would give libations, and they maybe still do libations. And I believe in churches till this day, which they use wine. That would be considered potentially idol served wine, or they would give a sacrifice or a gift to an idol or another religion. That's called Yayin Nesach. So that is in the category of Avodah Zarah, idol worship. Now remember, when we learned the Rambam, there's 47 commandments, most of the prohibitions connected to idol worship. Hashem hates idol worship. It's the worst Avera ever, idol worship, right? It's cheating on Hashem. So, and we can't have any benefit from anything that is connected to idol worship. So if a person is forbidden from drinking Yayin Nesach or having any benefit from Yayin Nesach, which is wine that was poured for idol worship. Okay? So it's not so common today that you'll get a hold of wine that was poured for idol worship. But if there is such wine around, it is absolutely forbidden. But then we have what's called stam yayin, plain, regular wine, undefined wine. It wasn't used for idols, but we don't know what it was used for. On that, there's 2 rabbinic injunctions and prohibitions against drinking stam yayin, regular wine. Is it an issue of kosher? Not in the traditional sense. In other words, the raw ingredients of wine are generally going to be kosher. They're grapes. Grapes are kosher. Wine is kosher. It's very hard to make wine not kosher. However, most wines are not kosher. Why not? Because the issue of stam yayin. Stam yayin means regular wine. Regular wine that was made or touched or handled by a non-Jew is forbidden. Okay? Which means practically almost every wine, unless it has a kosher certification, is not kosher. Why not? The rabbi said 2 reasons. One, yes, Yayin Nesach, which is wine that was poured for idol worship, that's idol worship wine, that for sure is biblically, again, according to the Torah, prohibited. But we don't know. What about a regular wine that was poured or shaken, right, around by a non-Jew? Maybe they had in mind that they were going to offer, they picked it up and said, this bottle I'm going to give to idol worship, to my idol. I'm going to use, this is a great bottle. I'm going to use this to serve my idol, okay? So that's one reason. And therefore they said, since we don't know, it's forbidden. And two, similar to what we had last week about Pas Yisrael, having to eat bread that was baked by a Jew, or Bishul Yisrael, having food that was cooked by a Jew, because we don't want a Jew to break bread with a non-Jew, come too friendly, too close, and then, God forbid, assimilate and intermarry. So they say the same thing. We don't want you to drink wine with a non-Jew. So how we stop that? If any wine that is handled by a non-Jew is now non-kosher, we'll stop mixing. Right? You can't sit together in the bar and drink. You can't go to their home and drink, and therefore we'll stop assimilation and intermarriage. And because of that, every wine that is not kosher certified is automatically non-kosher. And it's very harsh. Like I've even said, it's a very harsh prohibition. It stuffs up our brain. It stuffs up our hearts. Any wine that's not kosherly certified. Okay. So let's pull up our flow charts to show, thank you, Mitch, to see the different types of wines that are out there. These are all wines that are non-kosher, which means they do not have a kosher certification. Okay, so Yayin Nesach, all the way to the left, which means wine that was used for idol worship. Nesach was poured, dropped down, is absolutely forbidden, no ifs, ands, or buts. What about Stan Yayin, which means regular wine that was just made by a non-Jew? So it's just grapes, so it was made by and handled by a non-Jew. So if the non-Jew shook the bottle, it's forbidden. If they shook it, it's forbidden. What about if they poured the wine? So whatever wine they poured into the cup, non-kosher. The wine that's left in the bottle, maybe kosher, maybe not. What about if they just handled the bottle of wine? They didn't pour from it, they didn't shake it, they just moved it in your fridge. You have someone who came to work in your house, and they moved it. So if they touch the actual wine, of course, that's forbidden. They just move the bottle, it's okay. Okay? But this is all if the wine of the bottle, of course, was not sealed. But kosher wine has to be sealed. It has a cork, and then it has another wrapper around it. You have to remove, right, when you want to open your bottle of wine. There's a double seal. So when it's double sealed, there's nothing they could do about it. But if it's not double sealed, if it's open, right? So if it's in the store, you go, they're moving the bottles all around all the time, right? Even kosher bottles. Once they're bottled, they're dropped off at the store. People handling it aren't Jewish. Yeah. Once it's sealed, there's no issue of yayin stam. We're not worried that maybe they had in mind it's closed. They can't pour it for anything. We're not worried you're going to drink with them because it's closed. It's not a problem. It's only an open bottle. Okay. If the bottle is open, okay, and if they shook it, it's not kosher. If they poured it, it's a problem. They move it. What could you do to protect from an open bottle? Well, you could create your own double seal every time. So let's say you had an open bottle of wine. What you could do is you could double seal it yourself. You could put a plastic band around it, a wrapper, and then wrap that, let's say, with a rubber band and sign your initials. You're the mashgiach. And as long as no one moves it, it's not a problem. Or pours it. Now, there's another key item that would make yayin, stam yayin, not a problem, which is called yayin mevushal. This is very important in our community. Yayin mevushal. What is yayin mevushal? Yayin mevushal means cooked wine. They flash pasteurize the wine. And now that wine is considered to be of a lower status, the type of status that they wouldn't even serve to an idol. And in that case, it's not a problem. Well, here, I want to hear the story soon, Alyssa, if you want to share it. But If they flash pasteurize it, so then it becomes a vushel. Now it's not can't be used for idols. Then we don't have to worry about a non-Jew touching it. Okay, and that's why most kosher wines are mavushal. Next to the label on a kosher wine, you'll see the words mavushal. I'm going to give you a sample here because I think this is very important. Let's get my bottle here, right? So you got over here this kosher wine, right? It says OUP. Like we learned P means Pesach. It's kosher for Passover. But then you see in big words in Hebrew, Yayin Mevushal, cooked wine, or in English, Mevushal. Okay? So Mevushal, kosher for fire, but Mevushal. Mevushal is the key word. If it's Mevushal, it means it was cooked, and now you do not have to worry at all if a non-Jew touches it, pours it, shakes it. It doesn't make a difference. The prohibition on wine goes away. And therefore, generally speaking, buy mavushal wine. Buy mavushal wine. It will save any problem if you get mavushal wine. If you have non-mavushal wine, though, if you have kosher wine, as the OUP or OU on it, okay, but it's not mavushal. Now, you have to make sure that if there's a non-Jew touches it, that bottle or shakes, when specifically if they shake it, or pour out of it, toss that bottle of wine out. And nobody could drink what they poured, right? That's why if you go to the kosher wine, Jewish kosher wine, tastings, they're always going to have from people pouring the bottle of wine. Because if a non-Jew handles it and pours from it, it creates it non-kosher. So that's what makes kosher wine is if it's not been poured or shaken or handled, the entire wine creating process, they're not going to have a non-Jew part of it. They have to have a Jew participating in the entire kosher wine creating process, or else it's not kosher wine. And now that you have the kosher wine, if it's mavushal, you don't have to worry. If it's not mavushal and it's not sealed, you have a problem. Okay. Now here's where it gets one more step complicated. Okay. What happens if there's a Jew who doesn't keep Shabbos? For the law of mavushal wine, of kosher wine, halacha says that a Jew who doesn't keep Shabbos could also ruin and make the wine non-kosher. Okay? So if you have a Jew who doesn't keep Shabbos and they touch a bottle of kosher wine that's a fancy bottle, and a lot of the fancy connoisseurs decided that mavushal cooked wine is not as good, so therefore it's not mavushal. But there's a Jew who doesn't keep Shabbos. We have the same problem that Jew who doesn't keep Shabbos, if he would pour the bottle or shake the bottle, he would create it to be non-kosher. This is a very, very sensitive topic because it makes people feel very uncomfortable when they say, well, now we're even getting to Jewish people. We're saying that even if they're Jewish, but if they don't keep Shabbos and they touch the bottle of wine, it's a problem. Just so you know, that's why in our home, we only will serve mavushal wine. First of all, we might have a non-Jew working, or maybe at the table there might be a Jew, but nobody wants to ask exactly everyone's religious identity. And therefore, we're only going to serve mavushal wine. Saves us all the problem, okay? But let's dig into this a little bit more. This is a very important halacha and generalities here, okay? So we're going to go into this a little bit, understanding the category of a Jew who doesn't keep Shabbos in regard to kosher wine. So the question is, why is this person not keeping Shabbos? That's the key question at hand. So if they were raised in a religious home and they were given a beautiful upbringing, but then they just decided, you know what, I'm to spite Hashem. I'm not keeping Shabbos. Despite Hashem, I'm going against the Torah. So then if they would touch the wine, they would make that wine non-kosher. However, if it's a person that grew up not knowing about Shabbos, or knowing about Shabbos but not being raised in a home that necessarily kept Shabbos, and then even if they find out when they find out about Shabbos, but that's not what they were educated with and shown in their upbringing, So then there's a strong argument to say that it's not a problem if they touch the wine. It's only talking about a Jew who intentionally is not keeping Shabbos, not accidentally. And again, accidentally could mean that they weren't raised with Shabbos. That would be considered an accident. So if we put in the case of an accident why they don't keep Shabbos, in other words, it's not intentional to spite Hashem, so it wouldn't be necessarily a problem if they touch the bottle of wine. But if someone was raised religious and then decided to stop being religious because he's spiting Hashem, that person would be problematic if they touched this bottle of wine if it wasn't mevushal. As well as if somebody says, I don't believe in the entire Torah. I believe in the Torah, but not the entire Torah. I don't believe in the oral Torah. I don't believe in the Gemara. I don't believe in the rabbinic tradition. They would be in the same category as someone who doesn't keep Shabbos, that if they touch the wine, it would be the same problem. It wouldn't be kosher. Or if they say the Torah is not from Hashem, and they go touch the wine, that wine wouldn't be kosher. So to save from all these problems, what we do is we have mevushal wine. Mevushal wine solves the problem because in that case, it doesn't make a difference who touches it and who pours from it and who shakes from it. It is still kosher. But if you have wine, even if it says OU on it, it is kosher, but it's not mevushal, you have to be exceptionally careful who touches it. It can only be a religious Jew who keeps Shabbos could touch it. If not, it would become non-kosher. Which means, just explain, that if somebody who would they themselves don't keep Shabbos, they're not allowed to ever drink non-mevushal wine. That's what it means. Right? And you couldn't serve them non-mevushal wine. Okay, pretty fundamental and pretty, gives you an understanding of how Torah thinks. All right, now we're going to talk about alcohol. Okay, so alcohol, first of all, I'm going to jump to what we said last week. The CRC, the Chicago Rabbinical Council, has a fantastic app. Get their app. It will tell you what's kosher and what's not kosher alcohol. Most alcohols, as we don't have a kosher certification on it. So how do you know if it's kosher? Well, there's a few general rules that you could generally follow, but it gets more and more complicated over time. So let's look at the potential problems that could be. And even over here, they say, right, CRC Chicago, get over there. Well, look over there, too. Look over there. What would be the problem with alcoholic beverage, right? Alcohol is made out of wheat, barley, rye, right? So what could be the problem? It's a raw, it's a raw material. So he brings down over here. What could be the problems? First of all, wine base. If, Canadian alcohols, they say, could be up to 20% of them are wine, and that wine isn't kosher. So if there's any wine base in the alcohol, the whiskey, right, that alone is a problem. What about, and this is a big problem, if there's other flavors, liqueur has other flavors. Liqueurs must have a kosher certification. What happens if you have a vodka with a twist, a citrus twist? So now you're incorporating other flavors. Now you have to know, are those other flavors kosher? You wouldn't be able to just buy those without checking up, are they kosher? Anything that has any other taste outside of the straight alcohol, right? That become very problematic to make sure, is that, like any ingredient, is it kosher, what they put in? Okay, so wine is a big issue. And point 3 is, how do they produce it, right? The cask that they hold it in. Equipment, what type of equipment was it produced on? So you have to look into, especially if the sherry cask is a big thing. Some people say the sherry cask has wine in it, and it's non-kosher wine, and therefore it wouldn't be allowed, right? So when it comes to alcohol, we have to make sure there's no other flavors. It's not a wine base. It's not produced or in a cask of wine. These are potential issues that could arise from alcohol. So, brandies must have hafshir. Vermouth has to have a kosher certification. If it has any wine base, it has to have a kosher certification. Any other flavorings outside of straight alcohol has to have. And if we'll continue on the next page, you'll see there's other potential issues you have to deal with. And this is Very right. Chametz that Pesach passed. The rabbi Colin Weinfeld, who came in for praying for us, remember he spoke about that there was a Jew who was the biggest distributor of beer in New York City. Now, beer a lot of times is straight wheat, doesn't really have any of the flavors. It's fine. Doesn't necessarily have to have an OU or certification on it. However, what happens if the distributor, like in New York City, is a Jew? Oh, great, Mazel Tov, great. You should own the business. But what happens if he doesn't sell it on Pesach? A Jew is not allowed to benefit from anything that wasn't sold on Pesach. So a few weeks after Pesach, if you know that the distributor, or the owner, the producer of the beer is Jew, and you're not sure if they sold it, you have a problem. And that's why the job of all kosher certifications is, besides making sure the ingredients are kosher, they also have to make sure that everything in the store that's not kosher, or anything the products that are made is not kosher, gets sold from those companies on Pesach, or else that you can benefit from it. Again, anything made in Israel, we always have to be conscientious of the fact that it's made in Israel, and maybe you have to separate the truma and the meiser, appropriate tithings. Okay, so therefore, it's easier, of course, if the alcohol has a kosher certification. If not, if it's straight alcohol, there's no wine or any other ingredient added, and it wasn't distributed by a kosher distributor, Jewish distributor, you could buy it. Most straight, tequilas, most straight bourbons, no additional flavors. A lot of whiskeys, vodkas are generally fine. Most plain beers beers are generally fine as well. Just bearing the issues that we brought up over here. Any questions? Now is a great time for questions. If not, I'm going to hand the floor over to our good friend. Well, actually, I'm going to say one other thing then. Okay. So another issue. I know we're talking about wine knuckle, but another issue when it comes to kosher, I just want to say this, is a Jew is not allowed to eat blood. Now, where would you eat blood? Well, if you have a kosher piece of meat that wasn't salted, right? But when you buy kosher meat, it's already salted. And they took out the blood. What the salting does is it takes out the blood. However, when it comes to eggs, you have to check the eggs for a blood spot. What happens if you crack the egg open and there was a fertilized egg and this blood is already developing into that chick? That is not allowed to be eaten. Therefore, we must check our eggs for a blood spot. The blood spot will be on the yolk. On the yolk, you see, it could be a little blood spot, it could be a lot of blood. In that case, nowadays we would just throw out the egg. Technically, you can just remove the blood. Meaning, technically, you could still eat the rest, just not the blood. But eggs are, thank God, cheap, and therefore people would just throw it out nowadays, practically. Yes, please ask the question, Alyssa.
Was I not muted that whole time? Sorry.
No, you're just muted now. Now we hear you.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. I don't know. This is like a hearsay question, and I hate asking hearsay questions, but I'm just curious. Two things. One is like a note thing. One is anytime I buy brown eggs, they are just filled with blood, like the blood spots. So I don't even buy them anymore because I feel like I throw out the entire dozen except for maybe like two of them. I don't know what it is about like the brown eggs versus the white eggs.
And then brown eggs are fertilized or more natural?
I don't know if because they're normally organic. Yeah, we buy these cage-free from Costco now, and those they're white. They don't seem to have any issues, but the brown is like, and they're always more expensive, and then you're really just like throwing out the whole thing.
Right.
So just throwing that out there. But then the other thing was I actually I was checking an egg that was white when I was away somewhere with other people, and I saw that there's a blood spot in it. So I went to trash it, and somebody said to me, oh, Sephardi halacha says you don't have to throw that out. You can just scoop the blood spot out of it and use the rest of the egg. Do you know, is there any truth to that? I mean, I trashed the egg anyway because I didn't know. But
100%.
Is there
100%. I just said, and I'll reiterate, it's already Ashkenaz. Technically, you just have to remove the blood spot. That is the halacha. You do not have to throw out the egg. Nowadays, eggs are cheap. So, okay, you throw out the egg, In
Right.
concept, you just have to remove the blood spot. That is
Did
the
you
halacha.
say, sorry, I missed that if you said that when you were speaking before, and I was trying to listen carefully there because I was
Always,
curious.
always good to reiterate. Always good to reiterate.
But was it always that way, like that? With
As far as I know, yeah. Meaning,
huh.
because the idea is we can't eat blood, right? But it's not that we can't have animals that have blood in them. So
Right.
you can't eat the
Yeah.
blood.
Okay. Sorry that I missed that and then just
No.
re-asked the same question, but maybe I saved people some money from buying brown eggs in the meantime.
A, B, it's always good to reiterate something.
Thanks.
All right. This was wonderful.